One thing that we didn't touch on much in the main tutorial was working with synth blocks. So instead of working with blocks of noise, you're actually working with pitched, tuned instruments. And so we're going to go through a couple of different examples here in this add-on video to the tutorial. So there's really a variety of methods and ways to approach this. One is very similar to what we did with the noise. In fact, this is just very similar to subtractive synthesis in general. We create a very rich in harmonics, aggressive, powerful waveform, and then we kind of chip away at it and add that sweeping motion. And the only difference between this and subtractive synthesis is that what we're creating is really a one-off effect. So it's something that occurs in some kind of transitionary stage. So it might happen right before we go into the main drop or into some kind of breakdown. We might have a little bit of a sweep effect, and then it can either be really aggressive or it can be a little bit more reserved and held back, and it all just depends on the style of music that you're making and what's going to work in the context of the track. So if we have something more aggressive, we're building into something very aggressive, having that a little bit rougher, more dense texture to sweep into probably makes more sense. So we'll do that first. And for this example, I'm going to use an analog emulated synthesizer here, the OBXD, because I know this can get me a very rich and powerful waveform. So I'm going to assume that my track is in C major. So I'm just going to work with the tonic C as my basis note here. But I want to get something really, really aggressive. So I'm just going to remove the filter entirely. I might come back and do something with some resonance if I really want to get something really rich at a particular frequency. But for now, it's open. And I can very easily densen this thing up. So if you look at our amplitude envelope, we're good to go. We're not using this envelope at all. So right now, it's just a trigger gate message with the waveform. Like so. So let's go ahead and turn pulse on for both of these guys. So we have everything going. We're probably gonna have to turn the volume down. And then to really get this thing dense, we'll go into unison mode, and maybe I want to go up another octave. No, I think I like that a little bit more. So one thing I didn't know about this instrument before that always confused me, I think even in the course I didn't mention this, is that you can get fine tuning adjustments by using step. This will actually allow for oscillator 2 to snap to semitones. I never knew that, so I was always trying to do it manually and trying to lock it in. This makes life a lot easier, so. So I definitely like that. And then if we want to make this more aggressive, we can start to use this X mod and also work with the sync. So let's try all of those things out, just looking to get something really dense. And maybe that's actually something that will modulate when we create our block. And then we can actually go a step further here and just pan these out, since normally you're going to want to have a stereo sound for your sweep effect. That's just typically how it's done. Doesn't have to be that way. So something like that is going to be very nice. And now I just need to decide whether or not I want to use the sync or use the X mod. So I think I'm going to use the sync, and I'm just going to modulate that guy manually. So if we want to try to add a little bit more density, especially to the high frequencies, we can start to mess with this filter a bit. So something like that is going to sound nice. We'll just imagine that we need a 2-bar sweep effect here. And let's just find what the note is that I'm hitting. C3. Okay, there we go. And I'm just going to modulate that one parameter here, the X mod. And sometimes I have to go down and find it. On this instrument, that seems to be the way you have to do it. Or we can always just try to record this in real time. Let's see if this works. Nope, no luck on that. I'm going to have to find it manually here. All right, so I found it. We'll just go ahead and do a little bit of this action. Okay, so very subtle, but just something to spice this up a little. So now I'll take it and I'll go and I'll bounce it. And there it is. And now we just do what we would normally do. We'll go in and start by adding the filter motion and also do a little bit of pitch shifting. And with the pitch shifting, this is where it really gets interesting because we are now working with something that is very much tuned and very much pitched. So for example, if this was C major, I could actually take the pitch and I could start it down one semitone so that this is now a B. And I could have it then raise up to something like, say, 13. Well, really, technically, I just need to go this up by 12 on the display, but it's going up 13 in total, so that we're now getting that movement from the leading tone, the B, up into the C, an octave above. So it would definitely work as a great sort of resolution, and we can listen to that here. Something like that is pretty cool, or of course, we could do more of a drop effect if that was more appropriate. I just kind of like the way that sounds. I think that's kind of cool. So I'm going to keep it that way. And I think in the other tutorial, everything we did was rising up. So now let's go and let's add a filter on here. And in this example, I think I'll use something that's a little bit more quote unquote analog in nature. And we'll just use the low pass here. Maybe we'll throw some LFO on this. And we'll have that increase as time goes on. So we'll start it with nothing and then have it come up a little bit. And then increase the rate as well. And don't worry, I'm also going to be moving this frequency. So we'll just do it throughout the time. That's pretty cool. I'd like it to still even be going faster than that. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to do that or if I'll have to use a different device. Either way is fine. That's pretty cool. I like that. We'll get a little bit more resonance at the end. And then, of course, we could go in and add additional effects. I always like going with this towel chorus. I don't know why. I just really like the sound of it. And let's see if we can find that. There it is. Very cool. And then maybe we want to have a little bit of reverb on this as well. Put it into more of a space. Let's go reverb followed by tool device. Might just emphasize the width a little more. And let's also have this coming in. Okay, very cool. And if we wanted, we could also actually do something that's a little bit more experimental. I'd probably also add an EQ, but one thing that I like to do, and this is maybe more me, is I do a lot of bouncing. So if I wanted to cut off the reverb immediately and just have it kind of be a part of the sound but not trail on after, I can just go and I can bounce this again, but I'll just show you what you could do also, just in general, is if you had more space on the end of this, we would go and we would bounce it. And now we should expect to hear the reverb at the end, and you can see that tail there. So you can hear it, but we can always just go and we can cut it off like that. And it's a very abrupt sort of cut, so you could even go and a little bit more manually head in here and get it to something that you like, or even go crazy and take the pitch now, and right after this have it jump up by 12 or something. This would be interesting. So something subtle, but it would definitely make an impact in a track you were working on. So hopefully you could hear that. If you can't, I'll boost it so that you really can get a feel. Something like that. Or, of course, if you needed this to be longer, you could always consolidate it, bring it out, and do something a little bit more experimental and daring. So yeah, there's just a lot of options, and when you're pitched, you can do a lot more. So just thought I would show that to you. That's very much an aggressive example. And so for something a little bit less aggressive, we're going to work with a, well, you guessed it, less aggressive synthesizer, something that's a little bit smoother. So this built-in polysynth, or even probably the built-in subtractive synthesizer that you have in your DAW, is going to be a little bit smoother in character to what you get with one of those, analog emulated, quote unquote, dirty style sounding synths. So we have the polysynth here. You can already tell a very different character to what we were just listening to before. And I'm going to go ahead and just set up the standard gate message and get rid of any of this filter automation. You can keep everything within the synthesizer if you want, and you can, manually automate this. But I like just keeping things separate, starting with that block and then doing the processing with additional effects. So I'm thinking about taking this like down 7 or maybe up 7 actually. Yeah. So this might actually work, and it might work better to even play in more of like a chord or 2 notes. So again, we'll pretend that we are in C here. I think what I'll do is play a C and maybe the 3rd as well. Try the 4th. Yeah, I like that. And we can then go in and we can, move some things around if we want. For example, I would probably consider messing with the sync control on one of these. So we might emphasize 1 a little bit more, which would be oscillator 1, and then move the sync on number 2 and have this anticipate the sweeping motion up. We can also maybe move this around a little bit. Just the shape ever so slightly. Okay, so I like that. I'd go in again, bounce it, nothing new here. We get that block of noise to work with. We don't need the polysynth anymore. We can just solo this guy out. And this time, why don't we actually just consolidate it down to just 1 bar? And we'll take the pitch and have it rise this time, and have it just rise at like the very end, so something a little bit more extreme. That actually doesn't sound very good, so maybe we'll just leave it as is. And this is part of the decision making when you're making these different sweeps and transition effects, is going with your gut and saying, is this working, is it not working? So instead we'll use the gain really as kind of our main point of departure. Something like that. And even that by itself would work totally fine. And don't forget that maybe if you want to try moving the pitch in here, it might work better. So let's actually try that out and just see if doing a pitch rise with the actual synthesizer itself will make things any more smooth, transparent. Yeah, that actually sounds a lot better. So why don't we use this and use this as our block? So this is you kind of seeing how I would do these things in real time. And of course, it's difficult because you're not getting a chance to see this in context, but still hopefully helpful for at least a couple of you. cool. I think that's very, very nice. We'll bounce it. All right, so let's check this out now. I think I'm still going to use the gain. And then this one, when the pitch starts to change, we could go into pan and maybe do a little action here. So something like that would probably be pretty nice. And then again, we just would go in here and use something like maybe a smoother filter. Could also even use EQ to smooth things out even further. And we won't have too much extreme action here. So yeah, this would definitely be much more subtle going into some other sort of a break. And, I'm not even that big of a fan on that movement in pitch. So I would probably go back and, change it again, and so forth. But you've already seen a lot of different things in the main tutorial. So I'll leave it up to you to just take that main idea of working with the actual oscillators themselves to create kind of sweeps or transition effects. These could also just be momentary hits. So instead of being this really long, drawn out block, you could actually just put in there an 8th note or a 16th note and then use that as the basis to create your sweep effect. And that's something that we'll actually be talking about a lot more next week. So stay tuned for that. And I hope you've learned something new.